back, everyone. We will now start our next session with a panel on purpose, language, and trust during times of crisis, hosted by Ann Chu of Bloomberg. Let's welcome Ann and the speakers.
Dull. Ooh. Yeah, be careful. Stuff off. Supposed, I'm on mic. Around 200 on Zoom. Okay. Test. Yes, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I wanted to kick off our session with a brief introduction of our panelists. We have Pat Dwyer, founder and director of The Purpose Business, a company that helps organizations in Asia embed purpose and sustainability into their business strategy and operations. Now, before founding TPB, Pat led the sustainability efforts of Shangri-La Hotels and Ayala Land, raising the bar for the rest of the industry with notable firsts such as a ban on shark's fin, DJSI listing, impact measurements, and lead developments. So welcome, Pat. Thanks for being here. We also have Simon Murphy, who's head of reputation at Edelman in Hong Kong. He's a corporate affairs and communications specialist with more than 20 years of experience. He advises leaders on governance and reputational matters that rest on the credibility of public trust. And on zooming in with us, we have Jean Sung, who is the head of the Philanthropy Center for Asia at JP Morgan Private Bank. Now, in her role, Jean works with clients and their families to enhance their philanthropic impact, wherever that might be, offering advice, thought leadership, and learning opportunities. Jean, thank you for joining us. Jean is joining us from Hong Kong, just FYI, where she's quarantining with her husband right now, so she couldn't physically be here with us. So I'm going to kick off with a question to Pat. Pat, I mean, given the topic of this panel, I wanted to ask you, what is purpose from a corporate point of view? And during times of crisis, doesn't purpose come second to protecting your bottom line?
Okay, well, first off, good afternoon, everyone. It's so surreal to see more than 4 people in the same room. So well done for staying healthy. And to Chris and the Rethink team, congratulations for pulling this off. I guess the question on purpose, right? This is something that perhaps you heard, is one of the words along with you're on mute that we probably heard so many times over lockdown and quarantine. And a lot of people will say, well, we're only trying to make do and we're only trying to stay alive and not furlough people, so profit will have to come first, while saving our businesses and our jobs, profit, and maybe purpose will come second, which is what your question is. And I guess to me, is it a choice between the two? But what if you could save jobs whilst or because you're being purposeful? And I guess this is a challenge. We're a little bit more indulgent now that we can talk about purpose on the kind of with a mode and the context of recovery. But to me, purpose is not just a definition for corporations. Purpose is what it is. It is why something exists. It is your ikigai, it is your raison d'etre, this is your reason for waking up. And for corporations, the best, not just corporations, but any business, big or small, the easiest way to explain purpose is vision is where you want to go, mission is what you do. So, you know, a lot of us will have vision statements that to be the first, to be the only choice. I have my comments about that separately, but mission is what you do. So if you're Disney, you will say that your mission is to create great family entertainment, whether that's movies or a theme park, right? It's great family entertainment. And then purpose is your why. Why do you make great family entertainment? Purpose is not your mission. If you're selling cars, if you're selling coffee, you don't do that because you want to sell coffee. There's something else under that today you might sell coffee, tomorrow you might sell something else. And with Disney, it is to create happiness or to make people happy. That's their purpose statement, which is why they could do theme parks today and they could do something else tomorrow. Now, to bring it back to the context of recovery and hard times, if your purpose is clear, we argue that in the purpose business, when you have a clarity around purpose that isn't a poster on the wall, it activates in process, in people, and in product. You can't just say, creating moments of joy or making people happy, and then you don't pay your suppliers or any, on time, or you wait 9 months to do that. That's not a moment of happiness, right? So one of the things that I look for, or what I'm excited about with the recovery, is that it actually separates the companies who know their purpose and who are living out their purpose versus those who aren't. So I'm going to pedal you back to March. In March, one of the things, we're not going to talk about Hong Kong, just a bit more globally here. Qantas knew that they were going to probably have to let go of 20,000 jobs. I know this because my sister-in-law works for them. And the announcement of we're imminently going to have to do this, the first thing that the Qantas CEO did was to call the Woolworths CEO, which is a supermarket, who is just on a frenzy trying to bring everyone into a job because now we have to stock the shelves, now we have to get food to people. Imagine that foresight to kind of say, here's labor force, you need a job, and here's a supermarket that will go and take it. That to me is acting on purpose, not on profit, yes, profit too, but purpose first. I go back to Hong Kong when one of the first EDMs I had in March, an EDM I normally do not read, it's Hong Kong broadband. Not because I don't want to read Hong Kong broadband, but I don't really kind of follow stuff, right? But there was something in their first line, which is barter and bundle. At a time when we're all trying to make do with business and they're only trying to live out, the barter and bundle program was a product they pushed out because they want to keep the patronage, but they know people might not be able to pay for internet service. So you could bundle up your business. Say you were in tech and you want to work with Hong Kong broadband, or say you were, I don't know, a pizza delivery, you would barter with them so you stay online and they get their pizzas. To me, that is acting on purpose. It's not philanthropy, but it's being purposeful. So there's many examples of these, and I don't think purpose has to come second to profit. I think profit becomes an output of purpose.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you and do a deep dive into that, but I'm going to move over to Simon. Simon, you essentially help companies manage their reputations and earn trust. You call trust the ultimate currency in the relationship between an institution and their stakeholders. So why is trust so important, and what have you seen that surprised you during this crisis?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Pat. Echoing Pat's comments, it's a pleasure to actually be at an event like this, and slightly overwhelming, I think, to have more than 4 or 5 people in the room. So yeah, as a communications firm, Edelman is busier than ever before helping companies both respond to crisis. There's been a lot more crisis in the last few months, COVID or otherwise, and also prepare. We're living in an increasingly uncertain world, and the best insurance for protecting against crisis remains earned trust. Trust allows an organization to take responsible risk, and if it makes mistakes, it allows them to rebound from them as well. You know, the public are forgiving if they trust an organization. But not only are they forgiving, they also give great advocacy, they spend more as well. And I've got some statistics which I'd just quickly like to share with you. So many of you would know that companies who have purpose tend to perform better than their counterparts who don't. In fact, the sector index average is something like 5% better, so it's significant. And this is in part because 3 in 4 people actively recommend a business that they trust. But perhaps more importantly for this discussion is that 6 in 10 people will defend a company that they trust that's in crisis. And this allows companies, trusted companies in crisis, to respond in days rather than weeks and years. So look, without trust, there's no credibility, and instead you have organizational risk. And so it's communicating and acting with purpose, which is really a fundamental driver of creating this trust capital. And thanks to, I guess, a growing interest and scrutiny from a more informed public, so not just investors now, but employees, as well as government, of course, and socially conscious consumers, purpose has evolved from just being a nice to have to something that creates competitive advantage and creates value, as well as this insurance that I talk about. But the fact is, we're now at this inflection point. All of us, the world is in crisis. And it's defining us right now, and it's making us sit up and pay attention. And that's, frankly, I think, a great thing, a great outcome of this pandemic. And this is because COVID has accelerated these stakeholder expectations, and it's given us this social inequity, which is creating even more uncertainty and even more propensity for risk. So let me give you some more recent Edelman statistics as well, just to give you a sense of how important trust is in this COVID world. So when it comes to consumers, since the start of the pandemic, 44% say that they bought a new product based on that brand's response to the virus, and that 4 in 10 have actively boycotted or even advocated against a brand that didn't respond appropriately. 61% actually want to hear from brands about how they're going to help solve the problem. So I think, Pat, case in point, Hong Kong broadband, that really appealed to you. How is your brand, how is your business actually going to be part of the solution? And 65% agree that CEOs of businesses should actually step up and lead on issues relating to the pandemic. So just to close, the COVID-19 crisis is a great expectation level setter. And it's a moment of truth, not just now, but probably for generations to come. And many businesses and brands need to step up. If I could leave one final thought, it'd be that communicating with a clear sense of purpose enables us to act with integrity, honesty, generosity, and decisiveness. And these are the defining values of the moment, of course. But the golden rule, of course, of purpose, and I think this probably ladders up to what you said, Pat, is that it's what you actually do that matters more than just what you say. Even though I'm a communicator, it's actions that speak louder than words. So tangible action is what's more important than ever before for driving this precious trust capital.
I'm going to come back to you to talk more about building that trust and how we actually think through that, because I think a lot of people in the audience would be interested to know. But before I do that, I'm going to go over to Jean. Jean, you've been working for JP Morgan Private Bank's Philanthropy Center for over 7 years, and you work across Asia, helping clients do better and invest better and make their money work harder for them and for society. What are some of the trends you've seen to date, and how has this pandemic affected these trends, if at all?
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Chris, and the Rethink team for getting me hooked up. I have to say, for someone who's completely non-technical, this is a real feat. But also at the same time, I think it shows us exactly what are some of the issues that we have. So I'm in quarantine because my husband just returned. He's in quarantine. We're in isolation. But I think when you think about some of the families who've been in Hong Kong, around the region, and indeed around the world, during this time, if they have a home, they can quarantine, they can stay there, they can even help their children to study, they can even look after their elderly parents. But think about those who don't have this kind of facility. So let me start by saying and answering some of the comments that my two fellow panelists have said earlier on. And I would add, what's the value of wealth if it's not to lead a life of purpose? Then equally, at the same time, shouldn't all business be embedded with social value? So during this pandemic, here and even around the region, many of our donors have responded immediately, let's not kid ourselves, to local needs. They've been responding with masks, they've been responding with sanitizers, food, etc. But it's really only been in our own backyards, because those needs are so critical and so quick in order to build the community and to help the community. But I've also heard around the world that The billionaires together have given more than ever in the past 10 months, more than the combined support of 9/11 or Katrina or any other natural disasters, to the tune that 209 billionaires have committed a total of 7.2 billion US dollars, whether it's in financial donations or in manufactured goods or in equipment or even other commitments. They are also pioneering innovation in philanthropy, pursuing sustainable goals across their corporate and investment activities. So in a way, whilst we've been overwhelmed, the normal population, just thinking about how's the pandemic hitting us? Are we going to get sick? Are we going to die? How are we going to do? Is there going to be a vaccine? I like to say that while this was going on, the world is moving. Scientists, academia, philanthropists, and indeed many folks in the social sector are leveraging what are the mega trend, the ESG considerations that falls into our social development goals, their commitment in programs and services. So as I said earlier on, businesses, shouldn't they all be embedded with the social value? So I feel, and I've seen, that post-pandemic, yes, there will be long-lasting aftershocks. And this generation is going to be known as the lockdown generation. Jobs will be scarce, skills will be difficult, and how do they even network socially, skills, if they can't go to the office? How can they build their own professional networks if they can't go to the office? And increasingly, the wealth and the poverty divide is going to continue. And I do see, and I agree with you, Chris, I think, or Simon, sorry, earlier on, that you said, what about, market solutions? What about, the COVID expectation? I think COVID has actually accelerated the population's awareness of the linkages between people and planet. And what about that prosperity? So I've heard many people using many different terms, and they say it's going to be a new norm, it's going to be, a new beginning, or post-COVID, this is what's going to happen. I feel it's really just for us to work together towards a life of harmony. A life of harmony that can restore dignity, build respect to our fellow neighbors, but at the same time, we've got to pay attention to our common home, to the planet. And I see also a number of, second generation, third generation looking at, well, what are some of the things that we need to do? Is it going to be clean water? Is it going to be, renewable energy? Is it going to be single-use plastic? Still, there are many issues that needs to be done, but it's still very fragmented. So there's even more of a greater need of solidarity and for us to all work together.
Thank you, Jean.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you, Jean. I think, you raise a very interesting point about accelerated awareness, right? And so, Pat, let me ask you this. From where you sit, you established the Purpose business, 4 or 5 years ago? And how have you seen your clients evolve, develop, change? What trends are you seeing? And, Jean is absolutely right. We all now have an accelerated awareness. How has that transformed the conversation you're having with your clients?
It's one of the silver linings of sustainability, and I think, it's been mentioned this morning in many different ways. COVID has allowed, and I echo what Jean is saying, is particularly the S of ESG, because the E is largely organized or better templated for those of us in the pains of reporting and all the frameworks and things like that, right? But the S side of things struggles because it's cultural, because largely it's private, it's personal, it's labor practice. You follow the law, and then everything else is company culture. And how do you measure that? And how do you compare it? But COVID has accelerated the spotlight on things that we probably thought we could postpone until a groundswell of a movement does happen, until a framework comes on modern slavery. We didn't really scramble for a policy. Now we're here. And with COVID, I think it's things like transparency on supply chain. It's, you know, what are the terms for even just filing for a leave and working from home? I remember we were actually in the thick of a sustainability vision workshop in the Philippines on the 6th of March, and I was stuck there for 6 weeks, and they insisted to run the workshop at that time, and Hong Kong was like in the thick of it, right? On the 6th of March, we were doing it, and by the end of that workshop, half the room said, you know what, we really should be running a work from home scenario because they're in the food business. They sell tinned tuna, tinned food, and processed food. The next day, the first case was announced. By Monday, they were all work from home. And it wasn't because they'd made the decision to work from home, but that immediate switch, right? And it was being laughed at because it's very Filipino to just take it on the chin. But they haven't come back, and we're not going back anytime soon in the offices. What they've done was to catapult themselves so quickly. So because there's an emergency, you respond. But what if you could take, and I really hope that after this, or at least when we are kind of on the up of the recovery curve, we don't just fall back to exactly I'm going to jump on a plane for a 2-hour meeting in Singapore and I'll be back on Sunday anyway. Clearly this works. Jean is a living testimony, and as of all of us who are IT challenged, we're all living testimonies to being able to pivot. However, how we make our conversations count, how we really have boardrooms talk about the S, this is what I'm hopeful about, and this is what we're seeing more and more conversations shift to.
So let's talk about, this trust and purpose, helping to mitigate risk, right? Because the new normal, all of these cliched words, I mean, the world is a different place, right? And I don't think we're ever going to get back to where we were, right? So with this in mind, how have you seen purpose and trust help mitigate risk? Do you have any anecdotes or case studies you can share?
Indeed. I'm just trying to think on the spot. No, probably none that I can publicly share, but certainly, I mean, what I would say, I'm inclined to agree that how organizations present themselves externally has now become a priority, and I think it will be for time to come. And I agree, there is much more interest and dialogue around sustainability. We're about to see one of the world's biggest IPOs in the next week or so. I'm sure ESG will be a central part of that conversation. We've got global investors investing in that, in Ant. So, we're at a point where we can't turn back. But, a point that I'd just like to sort of pick up from Jean there is, we do live in a world of social inequity, and it is rapidly accelerating. And the challenge for many organizations who don't have the sort of strategic planning capacity of an Ant or a BlackRock is, well, am I still relevant? We had a purpose. The issues that we focused on no longer seem to be relevant. So what do we do? And our advice to those organizations is, well, what can you do with immediacy? How can you solve rather than sell? And then it's also an opportunity to reprioritize, realign. During crisis comes, it seems counterintuitive, but the opportunity to almost reinvent. What is your new North Star? But always, I think, our advice to clients is it is a means of building earned trust, and it's not just to fend for crisis, it's frankly being a better citizen.
Just in conversation before we got on stage, you were talking to me about, your advice to clients and amidst change during crisis. You talked to me a little bit about the 3 R's that you outlined with regards to, you mentioned regroup, reassess, realign. I mean, walk me through that thought process with clients and potentially, people in the audience who are trying to figure out how to build a plan now in the middle of all of this.
Yeah, well, of course, many organizations, bigger organizations, have acted with immediacy, and as Jean alluded to, money has been given, and donations made, but I think probably the ones that have made more of the limelight are organizations like Microsoft and Dyson, for example, coming together with Ford, where they put their production on the side and actually use their technological prowess to build ventilators for the NHS. So that's the kind of solving that I'm talking about. But in terms of them moving forward, a lot of organizations have also said, well, CSR, because surely purpose fits under CSR, so they've shelved it for the moment. And the first point around, when we're talking about those 3 R's is, no, you need to regroup, don't delay. Now is the opportunity, because the stakeholders out there, and they're not just out there, they're in there as well, they're your employees. And just a word on the wise on employees, how you treat employees and the trust that you enjoy from your employees is a bellwether for how that organization is trusted externally. So it's a great stakeholder to start off with. But yeah, regroup, don't delay. What is your higher purpose? Is it still relevant? Does it need to evolve? Is it achievable anymore? And so you need to reassess and also look externally. What are the societal and cultural issues that you look to try and address with your purpose? The world has evolved so quickly, and the needs have changed so rapidly in the last 8 to 10 months. So, what is the new North Star that your organization needs to be aiming towards? And then the third point is realignment. So, as I mentioned, it seems counterintuitive, but the pandemic, a crisis can often be an excellent opportunity to just throw caution to the wind and go, well, actually, let's start and get creative and revisit the drawing board. So time to reevaluate, do some soul searching. What is the new purpose for the next 10, 20 years that you want to aim towards?
So Pat, I'm going to turn it over to you now in terms of, for the audience here, they want to regroup. They're sitting down, they're talking to you. Pat, help me regroup and what is the process? I know you've got, not to do another the three Ps, walk me through your advice to clients. How do you work with clients to help them think through how can they embed purpose and sustainability into the business strategy and operations? Like, let's not, we could change the vertical on our website and write a bunch of words and make it all sound good, but how do we really embed it into our company's strategy and our operations?
It's not really anything new. And a lot of times we find that purpose is somewhere between what I just signposted, the vision, mission, and your values. It's somewhere there, right? But making it pop is not just writing another line in that poster, as we said. So we say product, people, and process. So if you say your purpose is, let's stay with the happiness one or the creating moments of joy. What does joy really mean? Is joy humor? If you're in the business of a stand-up comedy, then maybe it is. But if joy is your stakeholders being fairly listened to, and you sell a product that cuts across, various social classes, or there's premiumization on one end and then affordable brands on the other, then joy is suddenly something that you can put KPIs around, because let's face it, we're still in business. So when we start to talk about product, people, and process, we take the purpose statement and activate it. And this is what we find that with clients, the minute you say creating moments of joy process, you very quickly know the moments of non-joy in a process, like delegation of authority, right? So if it takes 27 signatures to pass a policy change, that's not a moment of joy. And I really hope that if your purpose statement is creating moments of joy, then you don't have 27 signatures. We used to kid about this because we say people are our biggest asset in Shangri-La. And I don't know if my successors are here. Pardon, this was during my time, not yours. But people are our biggest asset. But the frontliner, so that at the check-in counter, I haven't said check-in in months. So let me say that again, a check-in counter where you're complaining and they can't give you a recovery mode, right? They can't give you a bottle of champagne or, I'm sorry, Mr. Wong, this and this and that. They can't do that because they have to elevate to 27 signatures. And if you say you're empowering your people, if that is your purpose statement, then I have to see it in process. It's the same thing with people. If you say, we have open doors, just because you turned your office into a co-working space doesn't mean people are interacting more. In fact, you've seen the studies on the introverts have been further isolated because of that, because you never listen to your employees in the first place. And then product. If you're suddenly doing hand sanitizers because in the thick of COVID, is that going to be part of your next generation products? Or is that just a stopgap, a CSR endeavor, which is not wrong because we need it, but how does that pivot innovation and new product development? So this is how you activate. I mean, this is open, it's on our website, tools to kind of go on people, product, and process. And my challenge is this: when your purpose is clear, it's actually really hard to run an irresponsible business. And I'll leave that as a mystery for you to solve, but we can talk offline later on.
So Jean, I wanted to engage you here on what you've been seeing with your clients and stakeholders around, well, is there a triple bottom line now? Like people are looking to achieve more with each dollar that they, each check that they write? How have you seen things change, whether it was from last year and the protests through till now, with how people are assigning that money or where they're directing those funds? Oh, on mute.
Am I back?
Okay, yeah. There you are, thank you.
Okay, and I could answer that question. I probably need a day to do so. But let me just go to what is seeing philanthropists do. Philanthropists are very generous. There's never a shortage supply of funds or willingness to help, whether it is through their private foundation or through their corporate philanthropy. The issue has always been who do you give it to, where do you give it, and how do you give it? So whilst the pandemic is in full swing, we've seen the urgent response to critical needs. However, have I said earlier on that behind the scene, philanthropists are still working with innovators, with social enterprise. What are really innovations that can lead market solutions? Because we can't keep going along and give charity. You know, if you put a hand out and you put $1 there, or you put a bowl of rice in front of someone who is begging, that is only very short-lived. That's ad hoc, that's now. What we need to do when we see what's happening and what we see philanthropy is morphing or changing is there a hybrid? Is there a blend? So you will still need the philanthropic grant to kickstart any kind of innovation or any kind of program. But you do need to encourage the enterprise or the social innovators to pilot new sustainable solutions. So let me just give you an example. I know someone who comes from a long history, families of manufacturing in textiles. But again, with COVID and even before then, people have been thinking, what is the relation, what is the relevance between people and our world? Should we continue and have this excessive consumerism? Should I really have 10 t-shirts? And what we've seen is families such as that are looking at how are ways that we could create sustainability? How can we, stop the wastage and stop denuding natural resources? So therefore, we have these new upcycling plants that's come out and can, take 4 tons out of this city's more than 400 tons of waste, but it's doing something. And then I've seen another entrepreneur who's been a major glove manufacturer, but because of COVID, doesn't want to see this pile of plastic masks and gloves all over the place. So in her belief is, how do you take technology to a sustainable lifestyle? So there has been innovations where folks who have a clear mind, determined mind, committed mind, are looking at how can they develop interventions to end poverty, environmental abuse, or exclusion. So I'm really happy to say and hear that a number of the people that I work with, they're looking at, you know what, and to Simon's earlier point, is 44% bought a new product from someone that they believe are responding. So are young people. Young people are also responding to, I'm not going to buy from somebody who hasn't got a sustainable supply chain or who isn't sharing my same values. So I think when we see the next generation, generation 3 or 4, when they're looking at impactful responses, they're also looking at what's the best value. Is the value to the recipients as well as the value to the giver?
Thank you, Jean. We have a question from the audience that, Simon, I'm going to direct to you. It relates to how purpose relates to trust. And the question is, in order to be trusted, do companies need a purpose? Well, I'm opening it to the both of you, although this is directed to Simon.
Not entirely, but a point that Pat raised earlier is you need a why. That's so essential, and it's kind of marketing 101, Simon Sinek, how, why, and what you do. And of course, many organizations out there are very good at the what and how, but less so for the why. Why do they exist? So I think that's a good starting point, and the purpose will follow.
Anything you want to add to that, Pat?
Well, I guess to me, my answer is a resonating yes, because trust is hard to find, and trust is hard to cultivate and keep. And we know that it's harder to rebuild when you lose it, right? One of the biggest challenges of work from home is not the tech. It could be the tech on top of your ironing board or on top of your washing machine, because we're all strapped for places. The biggest challenge is trust. It is allowing people to be away and you're not seeing them in the cubicle number 67 in the 27th floor. And once the trust is empowered with a set of parameters that is not undermining anyone, you can see creativity. We've all been there. We've all been children with limited resources. You have to play whatever in the thick of the rain or in the cold of the snow, and you don't have all your facilities with you, but you get creative. When we started the Purpose business, we were work from home, and a lot of our clients called us at the beginning of COVID to say, you've been on Zoom for about 2-3 years, is it really safe? And the question they're asking is not a tech question, it's how do I allow my employees to just be away? And then it's interesting because some of them have pivoted quickly, not because of the tech, not because they have money to buy everyone laptops, but because they knew that if they empowered, this was what was going to happen. There was output. And we always say it's not the hours you clock in, it's the output you have, where now is the perfect time to try all that out. And so does purpose enhance trust? It's easier to trust if you can trace it back to why a company is doing something. If they're suddenly selling you this product and it's so far off the rest of the portfolio, you do wonder why. And I think to resonate with, Jean's point, we have very, very meticulous social media. There's a lot of noise there too, but it's so easy now to trace whether something is genuine. And if we are strapped, we're going to be in this economic challenge for a while. I think we're going to vote with very, very meticulous decision making with where our dollars are going to go.
And that dovetails perfectly into the next question, which is, it's so hard to develop trust. Can you share some failures you or your clients have encountered and the lessons learned from it?
That's another panel, right?
I know that's a big one, and we're short on time, but anecdotes in brief?
A very, very large company from this part of the world donated PPE equipment to the US and automatically assumed that was going to make headlines. It didn't. And in fact, more political turmoil followed for that particular company. But actually, conversely, a football organization that they're involved with in Europe, that they have been for some time and really got behind and been part of their sort of ecosystem. They supported them in a different way, and they didn't even think that this would generate news and goodwill, and it did. So it goes to show it's more about doing and doing it with how you can add value rather than simply paying lip service and giving for the sake of giving.
This is a good point. And last question to the panel. I wanted to talk briefly, and I would love brief anecdotes around partnerships. Do we have to go it alone? Public versus private? Who do we align with? Do you have any case studies or anecdotes you can share where, it doesn't have to be you yourself and your company going out there? Any examples and thoughts on that, on partnerships?
I'd like to kind of add to that, and I think and I'll follow up on what both of our panelists said earlier on regarding trust. I think when we give, there's a huge amount of trust that the partnership that you have with the social organization, be it a charity, community organization, or an impact investor, there is a huge amount of trust that the program or the service that's been described or expected or aspired to will be carried out. So that really brings back to the original discussion of megatrend in ESG. That brings back to the governance perspective in the partnership. Partnership, individual, if we didn't have partnership, if we worked on it on our own, I think it will take far longer, and also maybe you would exclude some of the value points if you did partner, let's say in this instance, with another donor, or your gift is partnered with more than one social organization, because that's a way that you can cut and paste quickly, but you can also deepen your impact a lot quicker. But I'd like to add a final note on that partnership, is that we often use the word scaling too often, in my opinion. The only way we can get to scale is if we advocate for policy change. And when we advocate for policy change, that means that partnership is really a tri-sector partnership. The funder, the donor may be supporting the resources, whatever it may be, but you do need to select with criteria of social partners that will be able to deliver that service or product. But you also need the private sector to be aware of what you're doing, because at the end of the day, they the real people who can give you that scale and have the multiplier effect across region, across districts, and maybe even across countries beyond borders.
Thank you, Jean. Now to Simon and Pat, any final comments before our conclusion? I'm seeing red zeros flashing, so I need to wrap it up, but any final thoughts you want to leave our audience with?
I'd love to talk about partnership and partnership with government and the trust opportunity there, but that's probably a discussion for another time. But if you're thinking about what your purpose is and whether it's relevant anymore, well, congratulations, at least you're thinking about what your purpose is. Think about what your permission space is, think about how you can add value now and in the future, but then go and do. It's not just about what you say. I think that's a golden rule.
Yeah. And if we could bring up the conclusion slide, just to wrap it up then, now is the time, right? We're looking at 3 R's: regroup, reassess, realign. We're looking at the 3 P's. Align your company's vision, your mission to purpose. Look at the product, look at the people, look at the process, right? Because consumers are more aware than ever, right? Crisis has made us hyper aware, hyper vigilant, and they're voting with their wallets, right? It is inevitable. So it will affect our bottom lines. And purpose can be a driver of business growth, as you guys have explained today. And the golden rule, I think, at the end of the day, is actions speak louder than words. So make sure you're doing what you're saying you're doing and not just making a beautiful website. And Jean, I thought that was interesting, the examples you shared, that purpose can be a driver of innovation. and that's something that we should definitely not forget. So thank you. We're totally out of time. Thank you, audience, for your questions. Pat, Simon, Jean, too short, but thank you so much for your thoughts and your input and your time.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Anne.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, Anne, and our speakers for the stimulating discussion.